elite in power can make money from the poverty of our people. A grant that keeps millions of our people one step away from starvation. We live in a country where 1 in 3 is unemployed, where more and more people are depending on that breadwinner. And what do our leaders do? They fiddle while our country burns. And so what we are saying today, the challenge that faces you is more than just forming a federation. They say in Africa, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You have to learn how to go together. When we formed COSATU, we were not like you. We had no money. We didn't even have a bank account. We had not one employee. We didn't have an office. We met in a university surrounded by police, eager to kill us. And so I think what we have today is something that we won through sacrifice. And when we stand here today, I don't stand here as Jay Naidu. I stand here alongside the spirit of Elijah Bahai, of John Gomomo, of the generations that gave their lives for the freedom that you enjoy today. Going back to J.B. Marx, going back to Clemens Kadali, and going back to the generations that resisted colonization from the time the settlers arrived. So think very carefully before we use words that divide us. We must be robust, we must be strong, we must be honest, but we must talk with the heart, not just the head. And that's our challenge today in the country. So these spirits that are with you, your ancestors, are concerned. They're concerned because 32 years ago, we tried to build unity. The vision of one country in one federation. And so when those ancestors look down on you today, what do they say to you? You will know it in your heart if you look in your heart. They want us to be unified. They want our beautiful country, our rich and beautiful country, to serve our people. There should be no poverty. There should be no unemployment. There should be no one without running water or a right to a free, decolonized, public, quality education. And so when you are debating here, you are not debating for the 800,000 members. You are debating for the 55 million people who belong to our country. And what they are saying to you as a generation that must find its voice, its agency, its struggle, its future, is don't just think about yourselves. Don't just think about 55 million people. Think about the millions of the future generation that will come after us. And think back to 1994 when we made a covenant with our people. A covenant that we will deliver a better life to all our people. And ask yourself the question, why have we not done it? And don't point a finger elsewhere. Point a finger to ourselves. We gave our power to our leaders. It was not organizations or leaders that won our freedom. It was people standing up, individually, collectively, organizing themselves and saying, we would rather die than to suffer the injustice of apartheid. I was 15 years old when I went to listen to Steve Biko. And what did he say? We have nothing to lose but our chains. That the mind of the oppressed is the main weapon in the hands of the oppressor. I stand here in 2017 and say that is the message again. We are at a tipping point. And it's not about Zuma. or Guptas. They are robber barons of today, and they are no different from the robber barons of yesterday. So if we want to be strong, you have to unite. You have to speak in a strong voice, a unified voice. You've got to have the debates so that it's honest debates. No sweeping things under the carpet anymore. Let's talk about the South Africa we want. So I ask myself today, what would I share with you? I cannot tell you what to do. I can talk about what I went through. Would leaders such as Elijah Bahai, John Gomomo, the thousands and thousands of people who taught me more than any university, but thank you, Eddie Webster, who in 1979 started to introduce me to socialism and communism. We cannot be bystanders any longer in our country. Our country is now at that crossroads. And what we have to understand is that at that crossroads, it is only one language that those in power understand, and that is building power. It's not about how articulate we are, not about our PowerPoint presentations, not about a business plan. Is do we have power at the point of production? Is our organization not sitting in individual leaders, but sitting down on the factory floor, on the mine shaft, in the shops, in the farms? And I think that's what we have to turn to, the basics of organizing power. Because there's only one way in which those elites in power will listen to us, is when we have power. And when we sit around the table, they don't see just clever leaders. They see the power of the working class behind them. But the working class is not alone. What we understood in the 80s, and particularly for us who came out of the Black consciousness movement, that in 1976 we thought with millions of people behind us, we will liberate this country. And we were millions. But they smashed us. And when we asked the question years later, why did we lose? We understood the lesson that we had to learn, that we had left our parents behind. We had left the workers behind. We had left the women and the rural people behind. And that's why we committed ourselves after 1976 to going into building the organs of the mass struggle, of mass power. And that's why, even when it was illegal, many of us, including Eddie Webster, went into forming the earliest of the trade union movement that led to COSATU and now leads to you. That's what we have got to do today, and why I feel it is so critical that alliance between workers and students, between the workers and women and workers and the rural areas. We need to represent the unemployed. We need to put humanity back in our economy. We need to put humanity back in politics. We need to put humanity back into our lives. And as I reflect on the last few years, we are destroying that humanity. We talk about xenophobia. Well, let me talk to you about the building of COSATU and the earliest trade unions. Those were workers not just from South Africa. Those were workers that came from the region. Chris Dlamini, a celebrated icon of us, of the working class, was born in Swaziland. He was the president of FAO and the vice president of COSATU. James Motlatsi, the president of the NUM, came as a migrant worker from Lesotho. So our responsibility in defending the working class has to go beyond resolutions. We have to tackle the cancer in our society, that those in power want to use these differences of ethnicity, of race, of language, of culture to divide and rule us. And that's the challenge I am saying you face. Capitalism has been built on slavery, on brutal colonization, on theft, and on genocide. It is dying today. It's in terminal crisis. What's really important for us, as representing ordinary people across the world, across different generations, is what will replace it. That's the conversation we should be having. What will replace a system that is going to die? Because it is inhuman, because it is breaking every boundary of ecology that is threatening the future of our planet and everything living on it. We are sitting in an emergency, an ecological emergency. The scientists that I work with across the world are saying 2 generations from now, our grandchildren will not live in a world where things we take for granted, the air we breathe, the water that we drink, the soil that we plant and grows our food, will not be there for our grandchildren. That's the reality. And what I know from the discussions with workers, in that planet which is dead, there are no jobs. So what do we do about that? How do we tackle those issues? How do they become central in our narrative, in our organizing? We live in the 21st century. This is a century that we call the century of the technological revolution. It's very different from the world that I grew up in with Elijah Bakai. When we went to organize a factory, there were 1,000 or 10,000 workers, there was one employer. Today, given outsourcing, given casualization, given technology, that world is disappearing. Technology has fundamentally changed our lives, the way we communicate, the way we organize, and the way we see the nature of work. We are at the brink of machines doing all our work. It is a reality. We are at the brink of driverless cars. We are at the brink of machines replacing much of the work on the production floor. It's robotics, it's nanotechnology, it is 3D printing. So what is wrong with that? Is technology the enemy? Should we take, like the Luddites did in the last century, 2 centuries ago, and smash the machines? There's no problem with the technology. The problem is the ownership of that technology. Imagine if we had to create a world in which that technology is the common good. It's there for the public good. How many hours a week do you think we should have to work? It's anyone's guess. 20 hours? 15 hours? If machines are doing all the work? How would we live? Well, if it is not owned by an increasingly smaller and smaller group of elites, the 1%, if the 99% had to own this technology and own the economy, then we will have time on our hands to do the things we should be doing, to educate ourselves, to learn music, to learn art, to learn about our culture, to read books. Why shouldn't we have a world that is able to deliver that to us? Why shouldn't we fight for that? Where our children will have free, quality, decolonized education that enhances their potential. The rise of the creative class. Why should we allow the system of exploitation? It is in crisis today. It will die. And so if you come back to South Africa and how we see this play out, why do you think this administration wants a nuclear deal? It has nothing to do with our energy security. It has nothing to do with the innovation of technology around the world that has reduced to half the cost using solar panels, solar PVC, compared to building nuclear power stations. It will create no jobs, because all of those jobs are so high skilled, they'll have to come from Russia or China or United States or France. They will have a stranglehold on our economy. And what are we doing? At the same time, a legitimate demand for free, decolonized, quality education, we are prepared to throw R1 trillion into a nuclear deal that we don't need and sacrifice the education of our children. So if you come back to the root cause, is if you take an approach as a trade union movement to say if one of your priorities is job creation, imagine the job creation through a renewable sector, where already we have the science and the data that proves you get many more jobs from renewable energy than you'll get from nuclear energy. Imagine if we had to do what the apartheid government did to deal with white poverty in the past. They created the railways, they created the escorts, they created employment through the state. Imagine for the tens of thousands of black graduates walking the street today, if we said this sector of renewable energy is a sector reserved for radical economic transformation. Imagine that. That's something we should be able to fight for. So I'm taking you back to a world where I think that we must understand we are not unique in South Africa. These issues that you are debating here are debated around the world, increasingly in a world that has become polarized by a 1% that is controlling finance capital and controlling our governments and buying our governments and buying political parties. That is why young people across the world are losing interest in voting, because they see our democracy has been captured. They see our political parties has been captured. They see that when a political party gets to power, its attention is focused on those that give it money to fight an election. And so we become the election fodder. Now, we should have realized that was going to happen. In 1996, we knew what will happen today. So if we want to be honest with ourselves, we were in the ICU in 1996 when they closed RDP and they opened GEAR. We're still in the ICU today. So I'm happy that we've woken up from this ICU now. And we understand the line of march. And I hope that this federation will not forget that it is part of Africa. I am part of a movement building led by Kumi Naidoo, who used to be head Greenpeace and one of our great patriots. We are building a grassroots movement across Africa called Africans Rising, not Africa Rising. And the Africans Rising is the 1.2 billion people that today live in Africa, that by 2050 will be 2.4 billion. We will represent 1 in every 4 young people in the world. And as a continent, we are saying, why do we give our power to our politicians? We know they will never represent our interests. And the only way we keep them honest is by being strong and organized and in their face. As Joe Slovo said, banging at their doors. They must know the moment they make the wrong decision, then they either lose at the ballot box, or we'll be marching against them, or, like we saw in the North Africa and the revolution for human dignity, some of them will lose their heads. That's the message we need to send out, that if you want to be relevant, you are part of Africa. You are part of African struggles. If we want to be relevant, we have to have power on the ground. If we want to be successful in our negotiations, it is the negotiations of power relations, the balance of forces, as we used to call. And that is, I hope, that from the distant past, 32 years ago, less for Sam and Fuki, but from the past, that is my hope. It's not often that one gets a chance, twice in a lifetime, to fight for the right thing. And I thank you. I thank the young people of this country who have reminded us of what we are supposed to be. And I fully support their demands and their struggle and their determination to build the South Africa and Africa of our dreams. Amandla. Amandla.
Where's this congregation? I think so. What past two? Open umthini ngifuna yena namkalazayo.
All right, live there from the launch of the new South African Federation of Trade Unions, which is underway on the East Rand, hearing earlier from Zwelinzima Vavi, but also hearing from a very passionate Jay Naidu, who was founding COSATU General Secretary, basically encouraging the Congress to take their responsibility and their role as leaders seriously, talking about building unity within the country's leadership, saying that leaders have to think about future generations and delivering a better future for all. He said that there should be no poverty, no unemployment, no people without water, sanitation and education, but he says we are still experiencing that in the country. He says that we are at a tipping point and that it is not only to do with President Zuma and the Guptas, but it is to do with leadership in general. And he says that leaders have to be united and defend the working class. All right, so hearing there from Jay Naidu, but interestingly...
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Jay. Thank you. Your input is going to assist us tomorrow. Will assist us a lot. Thank you, Comrade Jay. Comrade, I'm looking for this chap who was here to give us the names of the dining rooms that will be going to. Are you going to assist me, sis? Oh, thank you. Come forward.
Amandla, comrades. Amandla, comrades. Okay, our lunch venues are as follows. Serengeti, which is the thatch roof that side. Clover's Green, it's that side on your right. You go straight and then turn right. And then OR Tambo is there as well. Makopolo and Kinshaka is also close to OR Tambo and Clover's Green. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, comrade. Let us break for lunch. It's 22 now, 22, 3. I will appreciate if we are all in the hotel, the hall at least by 3:30. 3:30. Thank you.
Simone Lolosi Simone Lolosi Simone Sazulu ngelosi Sazulu ngezabalazo Sazulu ngelosi Sazulu ngezabalazo Ayabalega mapeche peche Ayabalega ngeshati Ayabalega mapeche peche Ayabalega ngeshati Simone Lustumo Simone ngeshati Simone Lustumo Simone ngeshati Sazulu ngestumo Sazulu ngezabalazo Sazulu ngestumo Sazulu ngezabalazo Ayabalega mapeche peche Ayabalega ngeshati Ayabalega mapeche peche Ayabalega ngeshati Simone Lustumo Simonile ungene ehlathini. Simonile uSidumo. Simonile ungene ehlathini.